Hey, welcome to Game Dev Weekly, the weekly show where I do game development. If you're new here, I'm working on Hydroneer, a mining game where you dig for gold and other resources to build massive mining machines. You can play the latest build on Patreon for $2. This week I released the 0.3 update, which is the biggest update yet. Let's take a step back in time as I show you what I did in the week leading up to this release. Stick around to the end of the video where I do the weekly giveaway for a Steam key from my previous game, The Scuttle. One thing that makes up a scene in a video game is exponential height fog, and that is basically fog that limits the amount that the player can see. Sometimes it can be used as an optimization method, or sometimes it's used just to make the scene look a bit nicer. So this is what it looks like in the scene with normally in the forest area. And if I turn off exponential height fog, you can kind of see the difference that it makes. I've given it this pink kind of color as well as this fog, which sets the view distance. So when I go into the next area, if we just travel over here, this pink fog, it doesn't really sit right in this snowy world. So what I've done is I've created a second fog. As you can see here, this is kind of more the gist of what I want. It's white fog instead of pink, and also a lot thicker. But the problem is you can't have two of these fogs in one level at the same time. It just doesn't work. So what I've done is I've created a brand new system that when you pass from one area to the next, it switches one of them off and turns one of them on. Now you'd think if there's a very sudden drop between these two areas, it might look a little bit weird. What I've done is I've made it over 3 seconds that it changes from one of them to the other. And this is what that looks like. For the last month or so, I've been working closely with a sound designer to design all the sounds for the game so I can put them into this 0.3 update. And now they're all finished, I'm going to start implementing them. They're all created by one of my friends, Dan. Some of his links will be in the description below. He's a really good sound designer, and what we've been doing is going back and forth with each other. He's been playing the game, I've been telling him the kind of sounds that I'm after, he's been creating them, then we've been iterating through those to create the best sound possible that fits really well with the game. And now I'm going to start implementing those. So here are some of the sounds. I've kind of broken them down into different sections. So some of them are just environmental loops, so they just sit in the world and they play a sound. So when the player walks past them, they can hear maybe the sounds of a waterfall, or the sounds of a forest, or some mountain sounds, whatever. We also have got action sounds, so when you're using your shovel to pick up dirt, it plays the correct sound that actually sounds like it's physically there. So the first thing I'm going to get started on is the environmental loops. So starting off with this main menu, you may remember from one of my previous videos I explained that this is actually the level that the player plays the game in. So it's already preloaded in. This isn't a video or a GIF or anything like that. So what I've done is I've actually put one of the sounds in the level to be exactly where the camera is now, so you can kind of hear like this wind going past the camera. And since we're so high up, it kind of makes sense to me. Later on when we add in some music, this may be removed, but for now I think it sounds really nice. So let's jump into it. So you may notice if you've got either speakers or headphones on right now that are in a stereo format, you can hear that the sound is actually coming from the right side of your screen, or your speaker, or your headphones. And that's because it uses a radius, so the sound is, for instance, kind of near enough where this waterfall is. So what's happening is the sound is being transmitted to the player, and then figuring out where in relation the sound is to the player, it plays the sound out of the corresponding speaker or headphone. What I really wanted to do was to be able to merge the sounds really well, so between these two waterfall sounds that are right here, you can kind of, if you stand in the middle, you can hear just about both of them. There's also some really nice sounds when you're walking through the forest here. Next, I've implemented the footstep sounds. So when the player walks, you can hear his footsteps. This also changes on the item that you're walking on. So right now you can hear more wooden footsteps and also water footsteps when he's in the water. I had to use a bit of a different method than what's traditional when you create footstep sounds. Usually you would pair it up with the animation of the character running or walking. But in this case, obviously I don't really have a character model because there's nothing here. So what I did is I put it on a timer that I kind of judged how fast footsteps are, judging by the rate of the character's movement speed. And then I added a loop which just plays one of the random songs depending on what the character's actually standing on. As well as having different footstep sounds, I also added in a pitch modifier, so it randomly changes the pitch of the footstep in a small range, just to give it a little bit more extra difference between each footstep. So next I added in some of the action sound effects that you get in the game. For instance, when I go and pick up this shovel, and when I drop it, it makes some pretty nice noises. I quite like them. They're kind of cartoony and fit with the aesthetic of the game. When you're using the actual shovel as well, it makes a really nice sound. Again, you'll notice that all the sounds are completely different when you hear them, but that's only because it's got a pitch modifier on it. I've also added in quite a lot of the sounds now. A lot of them I won't show you over the video, but just some of the interesting ones here. So these are some of the rig sounds that I put in. So the update's been out for a couple of days. So right now I'm just kind of making my way towards the next update, thinking about what I want to include in it. And one of the things is I want to actually change the sky. I'm using a free sky that I got off the marketplace now, and I don't think it really fits the theme of the game too much. These kind of wispy clouds, they kind of look out of place with the rest of the game. So I had an idea of copying the clouds from one of my previous games. So here's a screenshot from my previous game, Western Province, and the clouds that I used in this, I really like them. They had this kind of what we call an emissive value, where it has that white glow. And as the day and night cycle changed, the white glow would reduce when it was nighttime and then come back when it was daytime. And that's something that I also want to add in, is a day and night cycle. So I think the first step is just testing out some of these clouds in the world and seeing how they'll fit. So I already just put some in just as an example, and I think they'll fit pretty nicely. I'll also remove the wispy clouds from this sky and probably even make it a bit more like the last one. What I previously did with these clouds is I had them all in one big system that would spin them all at different rates, and I think it looked really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on that. So the first thing I need to do is to figure out the layout of these clouds, make sure they are spread out quite nicely, different sizes, different heights up in the world. I've just finished implementing these new clouds. So the way it works is they're actually on 4 different rings and completely randomized as well. There's 5 different models of clouds as well. And what these do is these 4 rings spin at different speeds, completely random from each other. So every cloud moves at a different speed depending on which of the 4 groups it's inside. This is a really nice step that later on when I actually implement the day and night cycle, I can just come back to this, quickly change the material so it takes an input from the time of day, and also change the color of the sky and the fog depending on the time of day. That's going to do it for this week's video. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in playing Hydroneer, a link to my Patreon is in the description. You can get access for $2 and help support the channel. Also consider subscribing, it really helps me out. I also have the giveaway I do every week. Leave a comment on the video and in a few days I'll go in there and randomly pick a winner to win a copy of my previous game, The Scuttle. Next week's video is going to be a bit different. I'm moving home, so the video will probably be focusing on that. Big thanks to all my Patreons. I really can't make these videos without your help. So I'll see you guys next week.